Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today, myself, Fe Moncloa, and Claudia Diaz Carrasco from the University of California Cooperative Extension will be sharing this great presentation with you. So the title of our presentation is 3 Tools for Engaging Latino Youth. Is based on research practices developed by my research team, and the list of those folks is here. And I am the principal investigator, and my co-PI is Nancy Erbstein, and Claudia is, and colleagues are our collaborators in this great project. We are engaged in this project to answer the question, the big research question, which said, what are the guiding principles and practices Latino youth organizations? And this presentation that we're sharing with you today is the first step that we took to answer that question. So before we begin, we will get a sense of who is in the room, and I know that some of you typed your information in chat, but just to get a sense of who's here. So could you tell us, where are you from? Which of these 4 regions in the United States are you from? So if you could just indicate a choice, that would be great. Give us a sense of who's here.
Okay. I've launched that poll, folks. We'll just take another 5 seconds. Okay, looks good, and then and Faye, can you see those?
Yes, so we have, most of the folks are from the North Central region. We don't have anybody from the Northeast. We folks, Southern region and Western region. Welcome. So the objectives of this session, so we hope that by the time that we are done today, you will learn of the resources available to better support you in the development of partnerships with Latino populations and places, and that you will also have greater understanding of the tools to use for an asset-based approach to map the ecosystem of Latino populations and places. So next, we're going to take you through another poll. So just to get a sense of where you're at in this understanding, how familiar are you with the resources available to better support partnerships with Latino populations where you live?
Okay, just another 5 seconds. Okay.
Okay, so some of us are very familiar. That's great. I hope that we can contribute to your knowledge. Then most of you are somewhat familiar, and a few of you will like help, and we're very glad to help. So next, Claudia will guide you through the introduction.
Welcome everybody again. So this is kind of our map for the day we're going to be doing. We're first going to start with an overview of the Latino population in the US, and then we're also going to discuss what we know about Latino positive youth development. Once we have this here, we will do the 3 tools that we have been using in California to support, engage, and retain Latino youth in our extension programs. And then we're gonna be ready for our next call. So I'm gonna start, why is this important? And I think this slide is really meaningful for us that work in the 4-H program, but I think general in extension, because we have a bold goal. And our goal is to engage 10 million true leaders in the next coming years. So considering the diversity of Latinos already within the U.S., it's important for us to start engaging these populations. And as you can see in this picture, the Latino population in the U.S. are not a monolithic population. It's a population composed of people from different countries, different races, different levels of education, different immigration stories. And so the first thing that we need to do when we are trying to engage them in our programs is to recognize this diversity. Also, we know that Latinos is the fastest growing population in the U.S. And in this graph, the Latino people, Hispanic people, is we are depicted in the orange line. And so we can see that since the 1980s, the population has been growing and will continue to grow in 2050. One also really interesting fact is that over half of the U.S. Latino children have a foreign both parent. More importantly, 80% of the Latinos in the U.S. are U.S. born. So now Freya is gonna walk us through kind of what we know about the Latino positive youth development.
Great, thank you, Claudia. So before we embarked in this project, we conducted a literature review, and I say we loosely because my co-PI, Nancy Erbstein, and James Fabionar are the ones that conducted the comprehensive literature review. And we did this to learn, what from practitioners of what already is working with Latino youth. You answered the question, what positive youth development program qualities lead to high Latino youth participation and positive Latino youth outcomes? So to frame this literature review and the question that was answered, this wheel was adapted from the National Research Council and Institute of Medicine to present the elements of youth development organizations. So in the left quadrant, you have the program elements that might include the things that are happening on the ground, like engagement, safe environment, we're building skills, youth leadership, STEM, etc. On the right top quadrant is the organizational infrastructure that includes the staff, the location, the resources, evaluation, and outreach that we do. In the bottom right, you have the program and community relationships, and this is how we engage with the community. And on the bottom left is this conceptual framework. So when we talk about conceptual framework, we're talking about the guiding philosophy, like the how we do things that are embedded throughout the rest of the organization. So for instance, in the 4-H program, our guiding philosophy is like learn by doing, youth-adult partnerships. So the literature review revealed 5 consistent themes across all successful youth organizations. This review was conducted with 114 articles, and all of these 5 program qualities influence all 4 of the quadrants that I share with you in the previous slide. And they are integrate extended understandings of youth development, support positive ethnic identity development, contend with physiological and social effects of discrimination, respond to economic poverty, and act upon the diversity of local and regional Latino youth experiences. In the next few slides, we will unpack each of these to ensure that you have a good understanding of them. So in successful Latino youth organizations, programs account for ways that race and ethnicity factor into youth development. And they also account for the dimensions that Latino youth may experience, such as immigration or the various immigration statuses that families might have, whether they're bilingual or multilingual. It could be bilingual in English, Spanish, or it could be multilingual, indigenous language, Spanish, and possibly English. Also, strong family networks, the various family responsibilities that Latino youth have, like caring, taking care of their siblings, picking them up from school while their parents work. And also a special emphasis, and we put this in red because racial and ethnic identity development, as well as acculturation, are important pieces of the conceptual framework. And what do we mean by acculturation? Acculturation is the process that of a new immigrant goes through and gets used to what the culture of the United States is without losing their own culture, as opposed to assimilation, which, maybe in the 70s or before, it was about, leave your culture behind and assimilate into the US. And the other element that is present in the conceptual framework is poverty, discrimination, and displacement. And how these impact youth well-being. So in the next slide, we talk about organizational structure considerations. So remember, this is like the things about staff and leadership and things like that. So when considering the structure of an organization, a priority must be on building trust with youth, families, and among participants. And while this sounds pretty easy, as I'm spilling it out to you right now, it is easier said than done. So to actually get this work done, we suggest that you employ bilingual, bicultural staff who are familiar with the local communities, and with existing staff, build the capacity of staff to negotiate inter and intra-group discrimination. What does that mean? So for instance, it could be that, there's discrimination between established, for example, in California, established Mexicans versus newcomer Mexicans. There's a lot of discrimination there. And then even with new Mexican populations, there's discrimination against indigenous Mexican populations. So staff need to be aware of all of these various dynamics so that they can help young people negotiate these group processes. And then the suggestion is that programs are free and also provide various ways for families and communities to contribute. It could be contributing by supervision, fundraising, small donations, sharing artistic talents or other skills. And then ensure that the program evaluation and support the organizational capacity to address youth experiences, biculturalism, acculturation, poverty, and discrimination, so that you're really measuring what matters. So Claudia will now discuss the program.
Yes. So we have a question in the chat, and I just want to real fast say that yes, we're going to have these slides available in the extension website. Mark is going to be able to help us with that. Going back to the program elements considerations, successful organizations serving Latino youth, they were able to vary their programs based on youth interest. And doing so, when it was appropriate, it also accounted for prevalent Latino youth conditions, whether these conditions was like immigration, poverty, discrimination, or anything that was present in the young's life, in the lives of young people. They also recognize rather than ignore rational ethnic differences. And so programs were really intentional of adapting and just recognizing this difference. And then one thing that is really important, particularly for extension programs, is that it also engaged local Latino youth and adult advisors in designing, implementing, and evaluating programs. So that means that they give them a significant space of voice and vote on whatever has been happening at the local level. I'm also going to talk about this other down right part of the model that we show at the beginning, and that's the community relationship considerations. As I was talking a couple of slides ago, there is a wide diversity of Latino population in the U.S. So in order for organizations to be successfully engaging them, they first need to understand the landscape of the Latino community, and starting by building trust within the community and the places. Once they have established trust, they are going to be able to broker partnerships. As Phil was commenting, it's really important not only at the individual level, but at the community level and organizational level, learn about the local inter-ethnic relationships. And then keeping it forward, we also we need to be able to identify local and regional assets. And one of the tools we're going to share with you all today is going to help you do that. So this is the first tool that we use, and is we call it the Latino Engagement Research Charts, and it's a tool to help surveying the Latino ecosystems. So I'm going to now ask you to see, well, as you can see around this wheel, we have different places, institutions, businesses, or like entities in the community that might be being successful having Latino youth participating in their places. And so now we're going to just take the 5 minutes, and if you can start listing the name, groups or organizations or associations in your community, that you believe are supporting Latino youth. So although I know and I recognize that as you are feeling this, most of you are working with local organizations, we really I wanna push you further and think about cultural settings and traditions, like some festivals that you have been able to see in your community that may relate with Latino culture. I see in the chat some institutions or associations such as Girls Inc., Campfire, the Forage Migrant Summer Camp. Then kind of also you can think about physical spaces. So I see a lot of organizations in this chat, but like which physical spaces are Latino communities gathering, whether it's families? Yeah, finally, I see some of the businesses around that might be supporting Latino organizations, the schools. Okay. So I see significant participation in the chat. We'll probably want to move forward. And as you keep thinking, and again, I guess one thing that I didn't mention is that this is a process that our staff is continuously doing it. So this is a live document that as we go through the community in our day-to-day life, particularly as extension staff, we continue to build into this, surveying the Latino ecosystem chart. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question. So Mark, if you can help me with the next one.
Sure. Okay, folks, I've launched that poll. Now, Claudia, is there any context for this question? What category was the easiest to complete?
So no, yeah, so thinking in the previous surveying the landscape, there was like a wheel with different scholars, and you some of them mentioned individuals, some other mentioned, actually I didn't see any individuals. You mentioned some association, businesses. So okay, as you were kind of feeling that, kind of putting your answers in the chat, in which category they fall, or you will think that as you continue doing the exercise will be the easiest to complete? Okay. Yeah, so I guess generally when we start serving the association as the landscape, as the chat, as the pool shows, it's easier to start recognizing association of businesses. And then as you start looking forward, you see like some community physical individuals. So physical spaces, you do mention some of it in the chat. There could be schools, libraries, like supermarkets. So I would just encourage you to think about that. So I'm going to ask you another question now, and it's like, what category was the hardest for you to come up with? I mean, I realized there was just like, we just have a couple of minutes here, but as you continue to do exercise, what would you envision to be the hardest to find? Okay, perfect. Yeah, physical spaces. I guess especially for some of us that work in urban settings, sometimes it's harder to recognize the places that are successfully serving Latino youth. So again, this is just like a self-reflection exercise. I really encourage you to use this tool, and it's going to be available in the resources after the presentation. But this is a starting point if you're interested in reaching new populations. I'm going to share right now kind of this chart. This is a sample from our research project. This was done in Sacramento County. And so there are particular institutions, individual associations, in each of these areas. So for example, cultural settings, there was a mariachi that plays in Sacramento, and they generally go to Latino-related celebrations. Then there are different businesses like radio stations, communication stations, TV stations, a taco truck. Then physical spaces where I see some of them, there was harder to complete. Depending on the community that you live, there may be some of them or maybe not a lot. Like Sacramento is a place there are specific community gardens that are better attended by Latinos. There is also Cesar Chavez Plazas, which is frequented by Latinos. And there's some farm stats in El Centro Road. And then cultural heritage is also one of the hardest. And for example, some of the traditions that when we were working in Sacramento, we see, the traditional piñatas, quinceañeras, or some Christmas carols around. So again, this is the one in Sacramento. It's really short. And eventually, we did this in both rural, suburban, and urban settings. Some of our more urban cities, like where fair work, like in San Jose, really close to Silicon Valley. This chart evolved into more like 250 organizations. And so it didn't was this format, it was just a continuous Word document. But again, it's just a starting point to look into the Latino population in your community. Juanfa is going to guide us into our second tool.
That the Latino Engagement Resource Chart, the Latino Engagement Resource Chart is a living document. So that was the first tool that we started when we embarked in this project, and to this day we continue to fill it, because through the strength, developing relationships and talking to people, we find out more cultural spaces, like, a street where kids hang out, for instance, is like one of those places that might go into the Latino Engagement Resource Chart. So we started completing this resource chart in 2016, and here we are still completing it. So I just wanted to share that with you so that you know that it's not something that you use, you fill it out, and you're good to go. It's kind of something that continues to be used. So the next tool that we used is the Latino Youth Development Resource Log. And this log helped us with the Latino Engagement Resource Chart as well. And towards the end, we will give you a link where you can download an Excel sheet that has this log if you would like to use it. So we first started out by completing it, filling information of what we already know from ourselves as youth development folks and people in our office or in our neighboring offices. So we wanted to know, what was the name of the organization, the background, who were the contacts, what was their mission, what was their core activities, number of staff, number of youth served, race or ethnicity. And then we also wanted to know what was the source of knowledge that contributed to this information. We also looked at, various, we all participate in various networks and coalitions. So we gathered information from there. And then when we had exhausted what we know, then we went into GuideStar, which is an online database of organizations, and we did one-word searches, and those are the terms below what we used. And then in addition to that, we also used 211 for 1 or 3 word searches. And sometimes both of these two tools, GuideStars and 211, wouldn't tell us all of the information that we wanted. So we went to the internet, and the last step that's not in here is we picked up the phone and we called people and we found out, okay, tell us a little bit more about your organization, because we really want to get a sense of of what is happening in our counties around Latino youth development. So then this slide shows you an example from Riverside County. And one of the things that I forgot to mention at the beginning is that this research project is taking place in 3 counties in California: Riverside, Merced, and Santa Clara. So I am in Santa Clara, Claudia is in Riverside, and another colleague is in Merced. So here you can see that we've, Claudia started to fill out the information about this organization in a way that we don't need to go back to the internet or anywhere else to get this information. So we have as much information as we can about this particular organization. So next, so what do we do with all of this information? So remember those 5 program qualities I shared with you at the beginning from the literature review? So we took those 5 program qualities and they acted like a sift to help us identify what those key organizations are that are serving Latino youth well. So then, we took the 5 program qualities which are listed on the left, and then we gave them criteria of low, some, or has a high presence of this program quality. And as you can imagine, you cannot know this just by looking at the internet. This is the part where, the phone conversation is helpful. So in this case, this organization scored pretty high. And that's how we selected organizations for the study, and also for us to partner with in the future. So I can tell you that in Santa Clara County, we identified over 200 Latino youth serving organizations. And after going through this process of what I call sifting to figure out, okay, what are the successful Latino youth organizations, then we identified about 20 something. And the reason for doing this process is like, if 4-H is going to partner with the organization, we want to be successful. We wanted it to be a sustainable project. So in the next slide, so that was like tool number 2. So the first one was Latino Engagement Resource Chart, which is a living document. And the log, the Latino log, which is also a living document, we continue to complete it. So for instance, one of the under associations, I noticed that you were, in the chat, you were listing organizations, but we also have associations that do not have a 501c3 status, and they have a Facebook page maybe, or they're kind of just word of mouth. So for instance, there's several indigenous associations that they coalesce from all the way from Oaxaca up to Washington State. And, so that particular association has centers in LA and in Fresno. Yet when they first started, they were a group of people that were coming together. So through conversations, then that log continues to be filled out. So the third tool is how we used is how to get to know Latino communities better. And then the important piece here is to develop relationships. So we identify and selected key informants to offer an eagle eye view. In Santa Clara County, I identified a key informant that could give me the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math perspective. Another person that was an activist and an environmental education person. Another person was somebody that could give me the migrant education perspective. And then I went to government organizations, people in the Mexican consulate and foundations to give me a sense of what is happening in the Latino community from both historical perspective to the present and the future. And when we had these conversations, we would we used a series of questions, and at the end of the questions, then they would ask us questions. So here is a sample of the questions that we used to try to get a sense of the Latino community in our counties. So we would first ask them to describe to us what, the Latino population or populations in, for instance, Santa Clara County, and then in their own words, they would share with us how would they describe it. And then the underlying questions below get to the, if they didn't share with us about first generation, second generation, or multi-generation U.S. residents, we then asked them about that, because it was really important for us to know, what is the current status of generations. And then we also wanted to know, what is the landscape of youth that are documented or dreamers or from mixed status families. And this is an important question because this information, schools cannot ask for this information. Youth programs cannot ask for this information. This information comes out in conversation after you've built that trust, first. And then we also wanted to know what were the sending countries, and then within the sending countries, what were the states or the regions. And then we also wanted to ask them, what are some of the key interests, challenges, and resources among local youth and families? Because one of our questions was to figure out is, what are the interests of Latino youth and what are the assets that they bring into the community? So next we have a poll to get a sense of what you know. So what best describes the Latino youth population in your county or your community as best as you know? Okay, so it looks to me from your responses that multi-generation is most of the responses. A few of you are not sure, so I invite you to conduct this process for engaging Latino youth populations and places to get to, to find out. And then we also have a few first generation and second generation. Interestingly, nobody's marked as foreign born. I just want to share that both Claudia and I are foreign born. I was born in Peru and Claudia was born in Mexico. Unless you ask, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't have known that probably about me. But anyway, so then the next question is, what best describes the documentation status of Latino youth and families in your counties? And this is, as I shared, a tough question to answer. Okay. Mixed status family, most of you sure, documented or undocumented. A great source for finding this information is if there's, consulates in your counties or nearby. And another source is the Migration Policy Institute website. They actually have this information. I mean, in statistics, they cannot tell you more detailed like you would find out from the consulate. Great. So thanks for participating. So in the next slide, we have shared with you like this asset-based mapping of a Latino ecosystem. So we started with the science-based key elements that came from the literature review that highlighted these 5 program qualities that are present in Latino youth organizations. And then we shared with you the Latino engagement resource chart, which, you had a chance to, briefly participate. And as I stated earlier, we encourage you to continue to use it. And then to use the Latino log of organizations and places and use it, and the important part is to evaluate organizations using the key elements. And in order for you to evaluate it, you need to become really familiar with the literature review beyond our presentation and actually read the literature review, which is also on our website at the end. And then when you've done all of this work, and this work will take you about, between the community engagement resource chart as a starting point and the log, I would say easily 6 months. I mean, if you want to do a thorough job, but it depends again on your county. Mine was a highly urban county with lots of organizations. And in Claudia, she identified 50 Latino youth serving organizations, and in Merced, about 15. So really difference in the context, and Merced is mostly a rural community, and Riverside is a mix of urban and rural, and Santa Clara is highly urban. Santa Clara is like the place of Silicon Valley, so it's like very, very, very urban. And then the next part is the interviewing the community leaders, key informants, and that takes time because, you need to develop that relationship, meet with people, and as you're interviewing the community leaders and the key informants, you come prepared with your packet of information about your program or cooperative extension. So because after they answer all of these questions, they're so curious about your organization that they will then engage in a dialogue about what you have to offer, and that's how we, started building relationships. It's kind of like a get to know you meeting, and that was like the beginning of a series of getting to know you conversations. Okay, in the next few slides, Claudia will now share with you concluding remarks.
Yeah. So for we really hope that this short workshop have you help gather some information on resources available to better support youth in the development of partnerships with Latino communities, populations, and places. And again, the 3 tools that we shared with us, especially the first one, it's really like a living document. As in, we hope that you do spend time, trying to find as much possible organization about your area before you actively start engaging Latino youth or trying to promote your programs among this community. And then also the three tools are just ways that can help us create a greater understanding of an asset-based approach of how to engage Latino population and places. So I'm hoping we have met these two outcomes through our conversation. So now I'm going to launch a poll to see how do you feel by now? Okay. So I think for most of us, yeah, you feel now that you better understand. For the folks in the call that don't feel that, I would really encourage you all to we have a couple of minutes to answer your Q&A. I know some of the tools, it's really just getting familiar with them and decide to use it. Also having the time, as Faye was pointing out, this is a process that in some cases can take up to 6 months. So I'm going to ask you now, kind of just share with you another question. So do you feel now that you have a better understanding how to use the asset-based tools? And those are the three tools that we shared. The first one is the Latino Engagement Resource Chart. The second one, they share it, and it's a log using our common knowledge and then searching some online databases. And then the third tool is the Key Informant Protocol, which it has all the questions from the organizations that we actually have this get-to-know meeting. So you see that some people of the call, yes, they feel that they have a better understanding. Before we end, this is some of the reference that we for the presentation. And then this link, I'm probably going to also put it in the chat, is when you have those handouts and those Excel documents that Faye was telling if you are ready to engage in this process. So Faye, do you have any other concluding remarks?
No, I would just add that I want to thank you for participating, and I really encourage the folks that would like to learn more to ask us questions live, because maybe we can unpack. I know that in the chat, one person said that they're having a difficult time hearing you, Claudia. So if you could kind of like come closer to the microphone, that will be great. And then at this point, I would like to open it up for questions.
Yeah, someone asked about a link for the handouts. They're not live yet. What we'll do is, I assume most of you probably got here via the Learn event. I'll put a link to that in chat just so I'm clear. So I'll get a PDF copy of the slides they used this morning, and that will be available at this Learn link. In addition, the recording should be available within a few days also.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So I'm curious of the folks who are present. Will you use these three tools? And our suggestion for you is to use all three of them in the same kind of sequence that we shared with you. And by using these three tools, my programs have grown, and so have Claudia's, and so have in Merced. Like, we are now partnering with the organizations that we were not partnering with before. And we have a much better understanding of the Latino ecosystem in our counties. And I've been working in Santa Clara County for 20 years. So it's not like, I felt like I was very well connected with the Latino community, yet through this process, I found out there was a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know. And people, and I was able to reconnect with people that I hadn't talked to in a long time.
Yes, I also want to add, Faye, that I generally, at least, again, in extension, whether it's 4-H or nutrition programs, I often heard educators in the counties that are really willing to start in this process. And oftentimes is like, so where I start this, and I just want to share with the group that here in California, the three counties when we conducted this research study, which again went Riverside, a really suburban county, then San Jose, which is, a really, you know, concentrated urban county, and then Merced, which is pretty rural. This is, a systematic process that we follow. And so now, that we are conducting or training people within California, just what we see in these pilot counties and the ability that the interview give us to create new partnership on places that we before couldn't have think about reaching out.
The question from Jose Garcia is, how much language proficiency would play a role in using the three tools? I can say that I used English in all of my tools, and occasion I used Spanish, but that was like for the grassroots groups.
Yes, I guess.
You want to share your answer?
Yeah, the first two tools, I mean, the Latino, the engagement chart and the log, I mean, they are conducted through the community. We compile flyers, we talk to people, but mostly it's in English. I think for the key informant interviews, when we were actually, sitting with someone for an hour, some people prefer to have that conversation in Spanish, and that was in, some cases in my county. But it really takes time since you start just, I mean, especially for the educators that have lived in the community, just to really see it. I mean, oftentimes you drive to places, but you never like make the recognition that, oh, this may be a place that it's engaging Latino population, and how can I bring my programs to this place? And so for all that part, language was not an issue.
Other questions from the group? I'm curious to hear from the folks that feel that they didn't learn something new. It could be that you already knew this information, but I would be curious to know how it is that we can help you or provide additional information.
While we're waiting, just to plug for the next diversity and inclusion webinar, I'm just going to put a link in chat for that. That's programming for clientele with developmental disabilities. I'd encourage you can go ahead and register. The link there is directly to the registration. If you'll register, just as a reminder, you'll get a reminder email 24 hours prior. So that's handy. We don't have a Learn link yet, but that's going to be March 22nd.
Well, it seems like there's no more questions, right?
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and if feel free to follow up via email. Just if just later on the day you have some concerns, I'm gonna just type my email in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to say that would be helpful. I don't know, Faye, if you're willing, if you want to put your contact info in chat. That's
sure.
always nice.
Okay. And then we're going to make another plug for our future presentation. I don't know. We have submitted a workshop on the research. So the answer to the first research question, what are the guiding principles and practices of Latino youth serving organizations? We have analyzed the data and we have the answer to that. And we submitted a presentation at the Cambio de Colores conference in June. And we also submitted a presentation to the National Association of Extension for Agents. So we don't know yet when we will have a time to share it, but maybe in the future we can do one here as well. But that one's longer than an hour, so because we set it up as a workshop.
Well, Faye, just to plug again, you guys are California's premium member with E-Extension, so we'd love to host a webinar on that topic. And also, I've seen folks use this as a strategy for conference submission is do a webinar first, and then submit it as part of the submission, put the recording in that submission. So it's a really good way to share, you know, folks to actually see what your content is, even if it's a shorter version. It's a nice way, rather than just submit an abstract, that they can actually watch a video or a portion of the video. It's a nice way to get your content out there.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And Victor, I'm glad that this information will be helpful to you. I can share with you that I did a similar presentation for National 4-H Council, and the executive director, Jennifer Tirangelo, said that the Latino engagement resource chart was something, I mean, when she first assumed that role, that she had used a similar process, but she appreciated having it already like mapped out and laid out. So it's kind of like, you know, it's a pretty comprehensive process.
All righty, that's all we have. If that's all, everyone have a great rest of their day.
Thank you. Thank you,
Great,
everybody.
thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.